very good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you here to the final event of the Circular Bio-Based Construction Industry, or in short, Cbci. And of course, a very warm welcome to our viewers back home who are also following this event live at home. My name is Victoria Tregep and I will be your host today. But of course, I've also brought along some very interesting speakers here with me. We can already see some of them on the first row. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our very first speaker of this morning, Mr. Perica Savanovic, lecturer at the Avans Hogeschool. Welcome.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm very happy to be here and very excited, I guess just as most of you, because we are now at the final event of a very interesting and complex project that we were happy to do together in the last couple of years, Circular Bio-Based Construction Industry. As a representative of the lead partner, Avans University of Applied Science, we're very happy to have been involved in this project, but also to use it as an example how to nurture collaboration regarding these very interesting and very complex subjects. The circular, bio-based and construction industry, three big topics joined in one project. I would like to welcome all of you here and the audience to experience this very interesting program that's been put together today that shows how we made these steps, and they're only steps because we have a huge challenge ahead of us to arrive at a circular and bio-based and sustainable living environment and built environment. And I would also like to use the opportunity to thank all of our partners for this project, and also to thank our host for today, KU Leuven. So I would like to say enjoy the day, and don't hesitate to contact all of us for further activities or for questions that you have, or if you are excited to know more about lessons learned and about the subject itself.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Perica. Of course, as you all know, this event is hosted by the KU Leuven. So technically, it's really the home of my next guest, and he's the head of the new Construction and Laboratories Division of the KU Leuven. So I would like to ask for a very warm applause for Mr. Paul Lodebeks. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for being here. Good morning.
Okay. On behalf of the KU Leuven, I would like to welcome everybody here in the room and everybody at home to this final event. I think we're very glad that we can present this and host this event. When we look at KU Leuven, we see a university that is founded in 1425. We see that it has 60,000 students, and we have about 13,000 collaborators. So when you look at it, you can see more or less a big tanker that is sailing on the sea in the direction that the captain is wanting to. On the other hand, we have about 7,000 researchers who each on their own domain try to do the most innovative, creative research that can be done. And that makes us the most innovative university in Europe since a couple of years. So there is a sort of dual relation between the KU Leuven as an institution, but all those individual research groups who have their own pace, their own dynamics. And in that sense, we are very glad that in this project we were able to join on a certain way our strengths. Because on one hand, when we look at the university, we see a big university who has big buildings. And when I look at my own work, we are busy with how do we build buildings for the next 100 or 200 years. We also have buildings that are 100 or 200 years old and we have to renovate. On the other hand, when you look at the researchers on this campus and when they step outside and they go into the Rabotwerk here in Ghent, you see the challenges we have as a society for the next couple of years. Because if we want to become climate neutral in 2050, there is a lot of work to have been done. And I think for me, the most interesting thing about this project was the combining of those two strengths. We have colleagues who helped with the researchers, with the tendering process, with the technical details and so on. And I think the symbiosis we created here was something that gave us a lot of energy and a lot of interest. So I would say, have a nice day, learn a lot, and of course, I think for the people here in the room, connect, because that's what my colleague was saying, speak to each other, talk to each other, because connecting and having the network is also an important thing to bring over all the lessons learned, all the experiences we all have, because together we are far more stronger than we are on our own. So have a nice event, and we'll talk later.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. That was definitely inspiring, and I'm sure everyone will take into account your insights and your advice. So yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a very eventful day with interesting conversations. Of course, we will have various speakers during our 2 roundtable discussions, and in the afternoon you will be able to participate in various workshops and hopefully inspire many among each other. So really a day full of inspiration, lessons learned, best practices, and practical tools and information on circular and bio-based construction. So that's all you need to know for now. There's a lot to look forward to, and I suggest that we start right away with our first round talk. All right, so we will elaborate on the legal, technical, and the financial pillar of bio-based building. And for that, I have here with me Emile Kwanjal. I have Martin Scherpenisse, Stephen Allen, Myron Koster, and Vincent Claude. Welcome, gentlemen. So the European-funded Interact2Cs project Cbci explores, of course, how we can use raw materials in construction more efficiently. And Emile, you're an expert in innovation process and circular design and construction at Agrodome, right? So I was wondering, what was the primal aim and related research approach in this project?
Yeah, we really wanted to have a more broader view on the use of bio-based materials in construction industry, but not only that, in a circular way and industrial produced. And we used actually several views to research it in practice. One is the technical design view, the second one is the financial economical view, and the third one is actually the broader view of rules and regulations, so the boundary conditions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Welcome, Vincent. Vincent, so as a project leader at the Material Laboratory of the Belgian Building Research Institute, your tasks are really about the research, the characterization, and also the development of building materials, both traditional and also emerging ones. So you, of course, know better than anyone what bio-based or ecological materials are. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes. First, I would like to thank you for inviting me. So here you can see normally slides with some bio-based materials that are sustainable materials. So most of them are created from biomass, that is to say animal or vegetables. Bio-based materials are included into a term that we call ecological materials, that also includes recycled materials and geomaterials like clay or raw earth. Here you can see some example of different families of bio-based materials. So many different bio-based materials can be used as insulating materials. Second common application is to use bio-based material as renders on sidings. For example, clay, limes, or mortars of EMS can be used. And bio-based materials can also be used for structural purpose, for example, wood frames constructions or M-plimes blocks.
Okay, thank you. People are taking a lot of pictures, so I guess what you're talking about is quite interesting. Stephen, up to you now. You're an associate professor at the University of Bath. Welcome.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Stephen, how can we minimize the environmental footprint of construction during the entire design process?
So at Bath, we were involved in some experimental research like BBRI, and also we were using life cycle assessment. And it's a combination of those two really, but I'll focus on the life cycle assessment can help us understand the environmental impacts of construction materials and whole buildings. So by that we estimate, for example, the carbon emissions caused during raw material extraction, manufacturing processes, then the use of the materials, the disposal of the materials. And by looking across the whole life like that, that helps us understand the total environmental impact. So one of the challenges with that is during design, you don't necessarily have a finished design, and you might be using novel materials like we have been in this project, so you don't have lots of information, so that makes it challenging to do, which is why we're doing research as part of this project.
Okay, and how can we use life cycle assessment when it's really difficult to get information, for example, for new and novel based construction products?
So that is it is a challenge.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. It is a challenge. One of the things I think, or we think, is to tackle the uncertainty that you face head on, and so be transparent about that. So, for example, where we were looking at novel materials, as some of the ones that Vincent was showing just now, we may not know all of the stages of the life cycle, all of the information about how they're made and used. So partly we were transparent about which parts we had been able to cover, and then where we made our estimates, we did so giving a range, giving some sense of how uncertain we were, to be able to put those up against more conventional established materials and help our design team consider that and then go for the lowest environmental impact.
Okay, so transparency is really key.
Yeah.
And are bio-based construction products and wall panels lower carbon than conventional alternatives, for example?
They can be. So we found some of the materials we looked at, and the wall panels, once they were designed as a whole, can be, but not necessarily. So one of the reasons bio-based materials in particular are interesting is that during the growth of the plants that they're made from, they're absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. At the same time, so you're actually storing and locking away carbon into the building. At the same time, the manufacturing process may involve fossil fuels or energy use, and fossil fuels and emissions, therefore. Disposal processes can cause emissions. So they're not necessarily carbon neutral, but they can be, so it depends. So some of the materials, if they've been transported a long way, or if they have energy-intensive processes in the way that they're made, they're not necessarily low carbon, but we found a number of them were. Yeah.
Okay, right. Thank you. That was very insightful. Vincent, back to you. How did the Belgian Building Research Institute participate to the project? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, for sure. So normally you can see the first slide, perfect. So you can see that the Belgian Building Research Institute was involved in different parts of the project. So we performed different research on bio-based material during the orientation test at the beginning of the project. Here you can see some pictures of the kind of bio-based material we worked with for the lab experiments. The focus was always to get more knowledge to better serve the contractors in the fields. You can see a second slide, normally. Yeah, perfect. So on this slide, you can see some tests that we performed on large-scale study on small hosts to assess the properties of bio-based constructive systems. We measure the thermal conductivity, the humidity, the temperature, the wood humidity. Our aim was always to make the measurement as close as possible to real use. Normally, you can see another slide, perfect. And on this slide, you can see that we perform different life cycle assessments also. And we also designed a tool that enables the contractors to assess the circularity of the buildings. And then on the last slide, you can see different schemes and pictures of discussion we had during the elaboration of the KUL Living Labs. So here you can see the foundations of the Living Labs house. That was a topic that was very precise. And below you can see some pictures of mechanical tests we perform on the wall to assess the mechanical resistance of the wall of the Living Labs.
Okay. And where is the Living Lab Foundation based? The Living Labs, where are they currently based?
Below.
Yeah, below the
house.
building. Yeah.
Below the building.
It's super interesting to see. Thank you. Martin, so you are a procurement policy specialist of the province of Zeeland. So why does the province of Zeeland participate in this project as a government?
Yeah, thank you, Victoria.
Welcome.
First of all, it's a great opportunity to get such a project to the province of Zeeland. That was very nice. At the second hand, as province, we want to develop our local SME companies to develop their knowledge on bio-based and circular building. And at least we are a front runner in public procurement ourselves. So we also want to develop bio-based and circular procurement. Also, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Myron, you are a researcher on the value of circular and bio-based building materials. So why is it important to be able to get a grip on the value of circular building?
Buildings are quite expensive also throughout their life. And usually it's only been looked at the investment. While if you look at the more longer term and the goals you have with this building, you can make quite an impact on the value it has for the users in many ways. And circularity can play a big role there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Emile, back to you. So you mentioned earlier the primal aim. We spoke about that earlier. What were the pros of the integral design research approach?
Yeah, in real life we have all the aspects, so we have to deal with, also in the research, to deal with as many aspects as possible. So what we try to do is a designer way of research. So we use actually 2 practical projects, the 2 living labs, one of Emergis Healthcare Center and one the living lab here in KU Leuven house. And then we search for a way to research it in real time. So we used interviews and case studies, of course, but we use also, as shown already, prototyping, testing, immediately similarity with the projects. So this interaction was really important. So we had the research at once and we had the real-life practice. So the real-life construction industry was already involved from the start. That is a very important one.
Sure.
So this combination of practical-based and research and project.
Right,
actually.
and real life.
Yeah, and the validation of it, you could say, that's a very difficult word, but you show actually that in real life practice it will work. So that was actually the most profitable aspect of the approach.
Okay, and Myron, speaking of business models, which alternative business models in the building sector do you think are promising?
Yeah. So if you look at financing, interestingly, there are not many very interesting at this moment. So if you look at a mortgage, the interest rates are low.
Yeah.
So usually that's what has been chosen. But there are other alternatives such as deposits for suppliers, but as well as recycling bio-based in another way that could reduce the cost of waste. And also there seem to be interest in insurance so that you can get value from later in stage at the end of life already early on. So a supplier can get value at the end of life in the beginning, and that helps them to invest more in materials. So these areas are interesting.
Okay, that's very interesting, thank you. And Emile, what are the pros and cons related to the use of bio-based materials?
That's a very big question,
I know,
of course.
it's quite broad,
Well, I think the main pro is actually we have a huge problem with material use in the world.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of waste of using materials, so we should go to a point where we use less materials. That's the most basic one.
Yeah.
For bio-based, the renewable materials are the basis of how to do it in the future. Because they will grow if we manage it in a very careful way. We can manage the use of materials in a sustainable way.
Right.
That's the most important one, I think.
Okay.
And then the second one, actually, how to learn from the use of the materials as shown in financing, and how to use it, how to maintain it, how to reuse it. So the monitoring is a second one, which is very important. Okay. But that's for every aspect, you could say.
Right, so those are the 2 key, most important pros, let's say.
But the consciousness of the awareness of we should make this movement from traditional materials to other materials, and combinations of those are the most
And the
crucial.
awareness isn't high enough yet. We're working on it,
also,
right?
it's not very, we're not used to. So
right.
we have to practice a lot.
And change always
and to
takes
collaborate
time.
a lot with different insights to come to this practical use.
Okay. And Vincent, back to you. So with all the advantages of this kind of material, why are bio-based materials so few used yet?
First, I will just add something to what Emil said, is that I've read in a recent study that 40% of the waste disposals come from the construction industry. That's why we have to change something. Okay, so why is it so few used? Well, actually, you can see some conclusion from a study performed by the French National Agency for Environment that identify 4 main obstacles. So the first obstacle was the lack of knowledge or training from the contractors. The second issue was the regulatory and normative issues. Then you have a question of price, but this might change in the future. And also you have a lack of prescribing from the contractors. On the other slide, you can see that, however, we have different paths of improvement. So the idea will be to create more labels, certifications, more standards, and also to have more trainings, more congress, more publication, and especially to train more the contractors. And finally, public authorities should support more bio-based materials in order to create a volume market and lower the cost.
Okay. These are very interesting paths of improvement indeed. Stephen, what are the effects of circularity on carbon footprint, according to you?
Generally speaking, it reduces emissions overall. One of the challenges we had in this project is that sometimes in designing something to be circular, it was increasing the upfront emissions. Doesn't have to, but it could do. So for example, depending on the materials you choose, it could. But with circularity, the idea there is that we're reusing either the whole wall panels making up, for example, the Living Lab here in Ghent, or we might dismantle those and use the component parts. And so in the second,
you could use them separately elsewhere.
And so in the second life then, that's the circularity, is circulating the materials. In the second life, you're avoiding the need for new materials, new raw materials. So that's where then, to achieve your function overall, which is say 2 buildings, you're lowering the emissions compared to essentially building it twice. You're building it once and then reusing. So that's how.
Yeah, that's how you have the effect of circularity, of course. And Martin, what were your experiences with this project?
Yeah, our experience were that there were so many front runners, great projects on circular bio-based building. Companies who had the guts to do it, so they just did it. And don't let them hinder by regulations or procurement rules. So yeah, it's a great experience.
We need those people, right, in this world. And Marion, where do you see circularity or bio-based materials that can add more value, let's say?
Yes, so especially around flexibility, but also health. So I think if we can link bio-based to health, decreasing sick leave and improving productivity, that can be great. But so far it's hard to link these two in research, but I think there's a lot of potential. And then also in remountability of a building. So if you can take a building apart or change it over its lifetime, it will be more valuable to its users. And you can make more use of a building by relocating it, for example. So there's also a lot of value in it.
Absolutely. And Stephen, is recycling and reuse of bio-based construction products better than landfill or incineration from the perspective of climate change?
Yes. Yes, generally. The only thing to mention there is that for people using environmental product declarations at the moment, so these are eco-labels for a material, we have to be, they have a specific purpose, but some of the users of those aren't necessarily trained in doing life cycle assessment, and at the end of life what you see in some of these certificates is large emissions at end of life for bio-based materials, and that's something we need to be careful about when we're interpreting, because it's good that we're using life cycle information to inform our choices, but those certificates give this impression of emissions at end of life, whereas if we're recycling, really the carbon can stay locked up in the material. So we need to be careful. They are that way for a good reason, but we need to be careful how we interpret the information.
Yeah, absolutely. And Emil, what is the most valuable insight from the Interact to See CBCI related to a certain approach for a successful application of bio-based materials to be applied in a circular and industrial way?
Well, the first one is to do it in an integral way. So as shown, to use all the aspects as in real life, so financial, technical, and the second one is to design actually as well the process of researching and realizing the project itself. So designing, I will say, to work with uncertainties in all the aspects we use, and then to put it into the project. The third one is actually the collaboration of different partners, which is very important.
As we're doing now, right?
Yeah. And the fourth one is actually to validate, to monitor and validate what we did. So all the methods we used were validated during the process with the partners, due to monitoring, and to ask the partners and the users actually how it works.
And to keep assessing,
And
right?
to keep, assessing.
Yeah. And Martin, so for you, the role of a procurement officer is, of course, much broader than just organizing the procurement. And you even brought a video along to show us, right? Shall we have a look?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Nowadays, people are increasingly looking at how projects can be carried out circular or bio-based. But how do you, as a buyer or project manager, ensure that you make the right choices in this regard? To steer this process in the right direction, you can use a newly developed procurement framework. This framework offers a practical overview of the necessary steps and the most important considerations. Let's take a look at these steps. It starts with formulating your ambitions. What do you want to achieve with the project, or which goals should be achieved? And most importantly, what will the outcome of the project look like? Next, you look at the feasibility of the project. It is essential to consider your internal organization and the market, and think about forms of cooperation that could help you achieve this. By carrying out a market consultation with stakeholders about the proposed tender early on in the process, everyone's involvement and expectations will become clear quickly. This influences each following step. Then you consider its future use and required functions, such as management and maintenance during use, and a possible new destination after the usage phase. Starting with the end in mind makes it easier to choose the right tender for the project. In the next step, you focus on the tender. The selection criteria for the right partners are the results of the previous steps. In the award criteria, you describe how circularity and bio-based applications will be assessed. During the tendering procedure, the previously set ambitions are always carefully considered. Then follows the realization phase. The focus is on cooperation and contract management. Think in advance about how you want to cooperate and innovate, and how this can be secured and monitored during the realization. The integration of circular and bio-based ambitions is a cyclical and dynamic process. Keep reflecting on the goals and ambitions set, and keep thinking ahead with each step you take. Good luck, and don't forget to enjoy your results.
That was a nice video, Martin.
Yeah, thank you.
So what are for you the most important conclusions of the project?
The conclusions are that you can see as a procurement advisor, you don't do the tender alone, just the tender, but you need to be involved in the whole process to get it to the good process and to integrate circular and bio-based materials in the projects. What you also can see is the collaboration between the different parties. Yeah, it's very important. Otherwise, your project will not finish with the ambitions you thought about.
So really be involved from A to Z and teamwork, I suppose, right?
Both very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Emil, what could the improvements and tips be for any of the future projects?
Well, as a critical caster, many, of course. What was in reality a real challenge was to combine actually the research part and the project part. And sometimes the interac facilitate and the rules are not help. So they're actually not able to facilitate the innovation sometimes. For instance, there was the removement of the house, which is one of the living labs,
right,
and would change the owner of the building. That's not possible within the Interrex rules. So innovation needs also a flexibility for the partner which facilitates the innovation. The second one is in the matching of the testing and prototyping related to the project. It's very difficult. So you need more time actually to have a kind of flexibility in using the testing and the prototyping in your real life project. I think that's the second one. It's a very practical one.
Right.
And that's also for projects in real life. You should have more time in your project to give partners the opportunity and availability to innovate, actually.
Right. So not wanting to be over ambitious and go too fast, but really take time.
Because it's complicated. You need actually this time and the iterative process to develop, actually. It's not a one-trick pony. It's
Sure, yeah. And what are improvements for future construction projects that you can think of?
Well, the availability of information is, I think, a crucial one. It's already, everyone has this own way to talk about this. And actually we developed one important thing. Is this booklet, which is still a mock-up, which contains actually the lessons learned, but not in a statical way. It's in a way it can evolve, it can develop. So there are links in it, which we can update when there is more and important information to share.
It's a living document.
A living document, The second one, to use the living labs actually as an example, so not a stable example, but a developing example. A third one is actually one of the main outcomes was that the consortium of Van Hout and Build-Up actually came up with a business case as a conclusion of the project. So to share actually this knowledge of a consortium, a real-life consortium, what were their arguments actually to come up with a business case involving the partners and containing all the aspects of designing a circular bio-based industrial product. I think that's the...
Have you had a chance to read it yet? The business case?
Well, we did have kind of talks and interviews, but that's one of the points I really look forward to share it.
I can imagine.
I think that's the most important one because people are, well, I think also the audience, we have to do something. That's how to do it. So we had also methods in there to use actually procurement methods to rules and regulations for the value calculator, but also the LCAs, the mountability index, all are available.
Okay.
That's the most important.
Great. Thank you. Myron, would you consider making long-term commitments, contracts in the building sector?
From what I've seen so far in the interviews, it's better not to. Because the future is quite unpredictable, and if you ask a supplier to be committed for 50 years, it's really hard to do that. So they will usually take risk premiums and also build in restrictions. And in that way, it's better to just own the building and take care of it in a good way, and make sure that the circular aspects you build into it and the remountability will get used over time. So also if a new owner gets in the building, that it's well converted to the next one in a way that you actually make use of the value that's in the building.
And which potential changes do you see in business models in the future?
So I see more around circularity existing, and also what I told before, like health, that aspect could make a lot of sense. And I think it's helpful if you're able to calculate the value of it, and that's what I tried together with several partners, so that at the beginning of the project you can already have a sense of what the value is of creating a demountable building. And in that way I hope that better decisions are made, and it's not only looked at the investment like it now usually works, like we have $1 million, let's build something, but you should look ahead to make good decisions.
And it can evolve over time, of course, as well.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Vincent, what would you advise to people who want to use bio-based materials?
Well, it's kind of complicated questions, but my first advice, It's a challenging question.
Challenging. We like it. A good challenge.
My first advice would be to think of what do you want to do with these bio-based materials. Do you want them for like a kind of philosophical, or like you want bio-based, or do you want them for the technical aspect? I think the best is to always think of a global view of a construction system and not to take the single properties of the materials.
So really look at the big picture.
Yes.
Yeah.
For example, if you want to take a look at a wall, you take at the whole wall, not at the different sides of the walls. And one important thing is also to respect the hygroscopic profile of the systems. Because if you respect the hygroscopic profiles, then you will prevent water condensations, and then your bio-based material will be safe. If you don't respect the hygroscopic profile, then you can have some risks, but you can also have the same kind of risk with conventional materials such as gypsums or mineral wool. And also I will conclude and to say that you should collect information and contact experts in the field.
Yeah, very important indeed. And Martin, is the project for the province of Zeeland completed now, or do you have any future ideas still?
Almost completed,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's also a start. It's
Sure.
a finish, but it's also a start. Of course, we want to develop further our procurement framework, and we are looking for companies who wanted to test it in real life with a real building.
Yeah.
So maybe in the audience somebody says, "Hey, come to me and we talk about that."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Okay, so to conclude this session, we'll watch a short video with a real-life example of the Cbci project. It's about a living lab that has been built at Emergis, an institution for mental health care in Kloetingen in Zeeland, where a new circular wing was added to the guest rooms there, and the aspects good cooperation involving companies and making use of exciting opportunities in Zeeland are well highlighted. So let's have a look.
Het is voor ons een heel belangrijk project geweest, waar we ook heel graag aan hebben meegewerkt. Je gaat niet alleen de kennis met elkaar delen, wat natuurlijk van groot belang is, maar je gaat die kennis ook toepassen. Je gaat ook leren met elkaar. Nou, en daarom vond ik het belangrijk dat we ook als provinciaal bestuur hebben meegewerkt rondom het circulair en biobased inkopen, zodat we daar met elkaar ervaring in opdoen. En dat betekent ook dat je dat ook internationaal kan gebruiken, maar je moet het lokaal in je eigen gebied goed opzetten en ontwikkelen. En wij hebben heel specifiek een inkoopmodel ingebracht, zodat je ook aan de hand van zo'n inkoopmodel en aan de hand van de praktijk ook kunt zien hoe werkt dat nou. En wat kunnen we daarmee ook richting andere projecten. Daarom ben ik er trots op en ik hoop ook dat het verder opgepakt wordt, maar vooral ook gedeeld wordt.
Ja, we hebben een Europese subsidie gekregen en daar hebben we een prachtig circulair gebouwd en duurzaam gebouw voor neer kunnen zetten. En dat past helemaal in de filosofie van Emergis, want wij zijn zeer bezig met duurzaamheid en de toekomst. Kijk, een GGZ-organisatie is natuurlijk altijd bezig met de toekomst van haar cliënten en welzijn voor medewerkers. Maar daar past duurzaam en circulair bouwen natuurlijk zeer goed in.
Wij proberen altijd als we nieuwe opdrachtgevers hebben in een van de eerste kennismakingsgesprekken samen met hun erover na te denken. En dat we ze ook meegeven, wat is biobased bouwen, circulair bouwen en duurzaam. Dat we dat gewoon een plaatsje geven in die gesprekken, dat ze erover na kunnen denken. Desalniettemin willen we wel graag dat de klant uiteindelijk zijn keuzes daarin kan maken.
Nou, deze mooie samenwerking heeft allereerst opgeleverd dat we een prachtige uitbouw hebben van het gebouw Emergis in Kloetingen. Het ziet er geweldig uit. Vanzelfsprekend ook een goede impuls voor de Zeeuwse arbeidsmarkt. Die konden daarmee aan de slag, maar die konden ook ervaring opdoen. Tegelijkertijd ook een uitstekende leerervaring voor Hogeschool Zeeland. En dat is ook gelijk richting de toekomst belangrijk. Hoe gaan we dat verder uitbouwen en vormgeven? Dus dat heb ik ook als wens en als ambitie voor de toekomst. Hier gaan we verder mee binnen het netwerk wat we inmiddels gevormd hebben met elkaar.
Het was een heel breed project waarbij voortdurend het leren centraal stond. Dus echt het samenwerken aan hoe kan het nog beter en nog mooier. En nou ja, dat is eigenlijk tot vandaag de dag nog steeds gaande. Er worden nog allerlei onderzoeken gedaan over wat is de beleving in dit gebouw, hoe is het om hier te werken, hoe is het om hier als cliënt ontvangen te worden. Dus het was een heel, zowel als het gaat over de bouw en het ontwerp, als nu in het gebruik, heel erg samenwerking.
Ja, met name de kennis, de omschakeling van kennis. Zowel voor onszelf is dat ontzettend belangrijk op kantoor, maar ook het buitenpersoneel. Die moet ook omschakelen van dat we echt op een andere manier gaan denken. Dat we gewoon meer aandacht hebben voor de biobased materialen, het circulair bouwen en dergelijke.
Nou, ik vind het goed omdat het vooral leerzaam is om met overheden en bedrijven uit andere landen samen te werken. Het is ook enorm inspirerend voor de eigen organisatie, ook vanwege de internationale contacten die je hebt. En ja, het is natuurlijk ook belangrijk dat je Europese gelden die voor dergelijke projecten beschikbaar zijn, ook naar je eigen regio toehaalt. Zodat we uiteindelijk ook tot nieuwe projecten komen. En dat is ook het doel, hè? Nieuwe projecten opzetten en ervaren kennis ook inzetten voor die projecten.
Right, setting up new projects, huh? Sounds very interesting. So I really hope that you enjoyed our very first debate of this morning. There are a lot of pros and cons to use bio-based materials, as Emile said, and of course there's also room for further improvement and development. And I think that it's really great to see that there are so many frontrunners out there in this industry who really had the guts to realize circular and bio-based buildings, as we've heard. And of course the best advice to somebody who wants to use bio-based materials is to really think with a global view of the construction system and not with the single materials properties. So try to really collect information and to contact, of course, the experts in the field. So with that, I would really like to thank all of our speakers today, Emile, Martin, Steven, Miron and Vincent. Thank you very much. And we will now have a 10-minute break, so we'll see you back in about 10 minutes. Thank you. All right, welcome back everybody. I hope you enjoyed your small break, and it's now time for our next and second round talk. We will talk about implementation, suppliers and the living lab of the circular bio-based construction industry. And for this part, I would like to welcome our next speakers, Lode Lefevre, Wim Peters, Maro Saridaki and Myron Koster. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And before we start off our second roundtable of today, let's watch a small short video about the living lab of the KU Leuven. Let's watch.
En dat is misschien het eerste zaadje om te kiemen voor dan op te schalen naar stadsvernieuwingsontwerpen. Er zijn vloermodules, een trapmodule, dan wandmodule. Ja, daar komt een tweede verdiep op. En dan hebben we ook nog dakmodules. Dus wij maken eigenlijk afgesloten dozen die dat we dan inblazen met een omgekeerde stofzuiger, bij wijze van spreken. Dat demontabele, dat is theoretisch, maar we wilden natuurlijk ook zien dat dat echt kon. Dus wat hebben we bedacht? We dachten, oké, we gaan dat ding gewoon bouwen. We halen dat terug uiteen en dan bouwen we het finale. Ja, je ziet het. We zijn bijna klaar hier op de werf. In een ideaal scenario zijn er heel veel van die woningen gebouwd en dan maken die gebouwen kinderen. Hè. dat die uiteengehaald worden en dat daar weer een nieuw gebouw uitkomt. Dat zou ideaal zijn. Ja.
I understood that.
That's quite the introduction.
So Lode, you are of course the project coordinator here, and you followed up both the development, the research, and of course also the realization of the entire living lab concept of the KU Leuven. So how was it for you to work together with so many stakeholders and different perspectives in such a complex project?
Ja, Yeah, as you can see from the video, quite a lot of fun actually. There were many people involved, many people with many hats, different hats, and first thing is to understand each other. So everyone has a different take on the project and different responsibilities. So understanding each other is very important, and you need to facilitate that. So what we did was organize a kickoff session where we put everyone that was involved at the table and had everyone introduce themselves, make very explicit what they wanted from the project, what the responsibilities were. And that was something we took advantage of during the process, because we had a good understanding why people did some things, and etc. So that's the first thing on management-wise, but then there's also the content, because we have this big question, we need to make this building, but what's it going to be? Because yeah, as a research group and as a research project, we can't lift up one solution as the solution. So what's it going to be? Because we need to make something. So therefore we did a brainstorm session. So we looked at what are the questions, who's going to do what are the competencies of all the partners, and what is their role going to be. And that's a very good setup to have a really good start. And that was very crucial.
Yeah, so really getting to know each other better, organizing brainstorms, creating teamwork. That's the secret to success, right? Yeah. And how can the holistic approach of the CBCI research project benefit the construction sector and the ambition for a circular and bio-based discourse?
So that's a really nice link to the panel talk we just had.
The previous one, yeah.
There's these three pillars that we have, which is what we call holistic. But that's one thing, and that's been discussed quite closely, very nicely earlier. But the second thing is holistic in the way that we worked research-wise, but also practically. This is maybe a first shout out to our contractors, Van Hout and Buildup. They are here also, and Comtis. They were, and there's also Melis Kerke and Juras from the other project, but they were really important to make our results usable for other stakeholders in the sector. So in that sense, I think it's a really interesting project, because it's not an ivory tower thing. We really worked in the sector. We had these case studies, we had these interviews, etc. And I think that's a really added value of the project.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Lode. Wim, welcome. You're the project coordinator at Van Hout, the contractor, indeed. So I was wondering, how can the circular and bio-based ambitions help with other societal challenges? Are they a goal in itself, or are they really a means towards something?
So the construction industry is responsible for a lot of CO2 emission and for a lot of waste of material. By using bio-based materials on a circular way, we can reduce the pressure on the environment. So it's a mean to a bigger goal.
Right. Okay. And so what more is there to research? What are really the next steps? What needs further discussion in this project?
So like Emil already said, we are upscaling the business case with our new concept circle, and there's the biggest question is how can we make it like payable, because now circular and bio-based methods are more expensive than the traditional way of building, and it's because of there are less materials of these bio-based materials. So now we're doing research, what is the business or the best business model behind, so it's payable. We can earn some money for it, but also the clients, it's payable for the clients. So we're doing a lot of research at the business model. Also, how can we automate the production? And at least how can technology and digitalization can help us to make it like more easy to build.
Yeah, that's definitely a hot topic these days. And so I can imagine that a commercial party like Van Hout thinks in a different way, of course, compared to academic researchers amongst us. Can you elaborate on that?
It was indeed a complete other way of working. But I think it was good, and it was also necessary, because there is too less knowledge at this moment about the materials and about the methods. So it was really important to have like a close partnership. But to work with academics, it's like sometimes it's difficult to finalize a discussion and to start the execution. So sometimes
we challenging. At times.
Yeah. But
okay.
It was a really
managed.
pleasant period.
I'm sure you contributed to one another and learned from each other.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Wim. Welcome, Maro. You are one of the project coordinators of Cbci. That's right. Yeah. So what is the potential in the Belgian market, according to you, for bio-based and circular building?
There is a lot of potential. We are actually at the starting blocks of this process. And as my partners in this project already mentioned, we need to inspire every level in society, and when combining research, you combine knowledge and also the end consumer, then you bring the awareness closer to the people that are actually going to make the transition happen. So Cbci is actually very inspired by following this process, and we really want to bring the inspiration to the local governments that are working very closely to us, and learn from this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of potential.
There's a lot of potential, indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maro. Myron, you're here again. We saw you in the first debate. You are representing Emergis because there was somebody else supposed to be here, Isar, one of your colleagues, but he's potentially becoming a dad anytime as we speak, right? So for those who know him, congratulations, and that's why Myron is here. So the buildings of Emergis, they offer added value to the care process, and you really keep a close eye on the CO2 emissions. And is that the reason why Emergis wanted to participate in this project as a care institute?
Yeah, actually, it's a health institute, and they want to create a healthy living environment for the people there. Right. And first of all, it's care. So that was one of the biggest priorities. But looking at the real estate portfolio of Emergis, they have quite some issues adapting because the rules and regulations change quite frequently. So they needed to introduce more flexibility into their system. So that's why they worked circularly. And this bio-based materials and this way it looks, that helps the living environment. So they also did a building before from a donor building. They created quite a building with a lot of bio-based exterior as well, and they saw the impact on their clients as well as the employees. So that's what they wanted to take a step further into this new building.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'm sure that was a lot of work. Let's perhaps watch a teaser of the living labs of Emergis.
En we staan hier op de bouwplaats waar het nieuwe ambulant centrum wordt gerealiseerd.
Die units die zijn makkelijk weg te halen, te ontkoppelen van het huidige nieuwbouw of nieuwe gebouw en elders in te zetten bij ons op het terrein.
Hier tegen het zwarte rekwerk komt het circulaire hout.
Onze insteek was eigenlijk 100% biobased. Was uiteindelijk niet haalbaar, wisten we eigenlijk ook wel. Maar we hebben hoog ingezet.
En ik zie hier ook de speciale verbindingen. Die zijn later weer uit elkaar te halen. Ook circulair hout. En die balie die is ook hergebruikt.
Balie is hergebruikt, ja. En ik ben ook heel benieuwd hoe de cliënt dit gaat ervaren.
Right. So, Myron, what was the biggest challenge in this project for you?
So for Emergis, the biggest challenge was really to strike a balance between the rules and regulations in the healthcare sector and making sure that it's good for clients with mental issues, as well as creating something flexible and bio-based. So like balancing these two and doing something innovative was complicated. Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of challenges, Lode, you've done a lot of research, and the cliché is that academics are thinkers and that contractors are doers. So how did you go from thinking to actually building this house?
Yeah, we tried to meet each other in the middle. So we did a lot of prototyping, which was also mentioned in the first panel. And yeah, prototyping is something that lab rats like at university do a lot, but also companies that are busy with a lot of innovation also do a lot. So that's something we had in common, and which was really necessary in this project to do, because the whole building system was completely different than what exists, but obviously builds upon existing systems. But there was really a lot to think about and to really try before we started building this thing on the campus. So that's something that really helped us to find each other. And additional stuff that we did to this methodology was also like a documentation document. So we had a process map that we showed the whole process, that we had consensus on, that we need to do all these things. Then we had something we called a morphological chart, which contains different solutions for different questions. Morphological chart. Okay. Yeah, quite a word indeed. But it's a nice tool to communicate information so that everyone understands each other. And yeah, actually the building itself is a big prototype. So this prototyping and finding methodologies that both parties understand was something that really helped us. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm quite excited to see the building now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lode. And Maro, what was the contribution of the expo and really the role of Cbci to circular and bio-based construction industry?
Well, we have actually, as an organization, we have changed in the last 5 years, and certainly throughout this project, we are focusing more from sustainability and renovation to circularity and bio-based. And this increase in ambition, we also want to bring through the expo that we set up in Cbci. But we are also busy with the entire site of our organization becoming circular. And by showing this change, you increase awareness, but you also make it clear that it is doable, and it is doable now. And that's actually gives not only inspiration, encouragement, but also the potential, the possibility to see what others are doing and to copy, or not only to copy, but to make things their own and embark in journeys.
And Lode, how will they integrate the lessons learned into education for future professionals?
Yeah. So Emil already plugged the book. So that's a lot of material that we made for students. Obviously, KU Leuven is involved with students, but there's also professionals. So students are future professionals, but there's also the professionals of today. And we are busy with making a practical guide. So that's material that's available for professionals, very specifically chosen outputs from the project that will be made accessible to professionals, and there will be also workshops organized for that. But in addition to this practical guide, there's obviously the white papers that we made. So there's a white paper on all the material that Myron worked on, so mostly financials. Then there's a white paper on procurement. That's what Martin and his team worked a lot on. And then there's a white paper on rules and regulations. And that's very tangible material that's very usable for professionals.
Okay, so 3 white papers in total.
3 white papers, practical guides, and then the book.
Okay, that's quite a lot of material already for educational purposes. And so sorry, Myron, in what aspects of the design or execution was the collaboration form between partners really a decisive advantage?
Yeah, so especially around the installations. So if you look at the CLT panels, if you want to make them reusable, you want to damage them as little as possible. So it really took a lot of conversations and brainstorms in order to come up with a solution where the wiring and the cabling goes around the unit and then comes back in. And in this way, you keep the CLT panels mostly intact. And there are many more aspects to the whole building that a lot of thought went into, but this is one good example.
Okay. And Maro, how can the overarching Cbci research and its applications be passed on to the target group really in a clear manner?
This is actually the role of the expo at Cbci, and there is so much wealth of information that was and knowledge that was created in the project. But the strongest part is the story, and the story of the Living Lab in the KU Leuven and in Emergis. And the strongest way to channel a message is through these telling of the story. So we basically, in the exposition build-up, we tried to incorporate the various levels of knowledge, and there were a lot, through this story. So we are hoping that by making workshops and guided tours and really targeting on our adjusting basically the message according to the target groups that are coming to the expo, that the right message is passed.
That's real storytelling, right? Really adapting your message to the right target audience, indeed. And Myron, what value does circularity bring to Emergis?
Yeah, for Emergis, it's really mainly this flexibility and also the healthy aspect. But with this flexibility, they can basically use what is now office buildings and place them on the other part of the site, convert them to apartments. And in this way, they can adapt to the changes of the health industry, because sometimes it's more like group work and sometimes it's more individualized. And this basically changes every 4 to 8 years. So you have to be able to adjust your site as well.
And be adaptable.
Yeah,
at any point. Okay. And Maro, what is the benefit of installing at the expo at Cbci? What is really the benefit, the advantage of that?
Well, because the visitor will be able to not only see the expo and the knowledge that has gone in it, but because we have also built a circular office building, they will immediately be able to
see what you've done in practice, a real-life
practice, and to see also the beauty of this transition in a broader site. And we also have the Exploded View Building Beyond pavilion that will come in a year's time. So we are hoping in many different levels to inspire our visitors, so that it becomes a day of not only inspiration but of knowledge and of living with an idea of how to actually make the first step of your own project.
Yeah, sounds like there's a lot of emotions involved
as
well, if I hear it that way. And so, Myron, what are the recommendations for other consortia or other contractors for the use of circular and bio-based methods in an industrial way that you could recommend?
Yeah, so if you want to go industrial, you really have to take that seriously. So as a contractor, you run a big risk to go into business as usual, while this takes more attention, as we've just discussed. So really deciding to go for it is really important, as well as taking the time to look at it in an integral way, and also look ahead. So what is the value of this building for the target group, and how can we maximize that? So these are aspects that you probably should take into account.
Definitely.
But you should go your own way and just start doing it as well, because there's quite a lot of examples now and people to learn from. So no excuse, I would say.
Absolutely. That really sounds promising. But as they say, an image says more than 1,000 words. So let's have a look at the video of the expo at Cbci.
De bouwsector is booming. Het zijn boeiende tijden waar vooral out of the box moet gedacht worden. En Cbci die weten wel van wanten. We nemen eens een kijkje in de gloednieuwe expo over circulair en biobased bouwen. Kom je mee? Als Centrum Duurzaam Bouwen en Innovatie in de Bouw streeft Kamp C naar een transitie in de bouwsector. Wist jij dat de bouwsector als grootverbruiker van grondstoffen zorgt voor maar liefst 33% van de totale CO2-uitstoot? Wel, dat moet beter. Een transitie van het huidige lineair bouwen naar het circulair en biobased bouwen is dus noodzakelijk. Daar willen we samen aan werken. Kijk, hier begint het allemaal. Het Circular and Biobased Construction Industrie Partnerschap ontwikkelt een aanpak die samenhang garandeert tussen de sociale, technische en juridische aspecten. Ze ontwikkelen businessmodellen om circulair en biobased te kunnen ontwerpen en bouwen. Nu, om deze evolutie te versnellen moet er natuurlijk een nieuwe kijk op bouwen komen. Regelgevingen en wetgevingen moeten aangepast worden. En daar zorgt deze samenwerking voor. In de praktijk hebben we dus nood aan meer kennis over circulaire en biobased materialen. Waar en hoe ze kunnen toegepast worden. Niet alleen nieuwe materialen, maar ook recuperatie en recyclage van bestaande materialen. Circulair bouwen, dat begint dus eigenlijk al bij het ontwerp. Nu, hoe kunnen we bepaalde elementen demonteren en bepaalde elementen en/of ruimtes flexibel gebruiken? Ontdek hoe je met biobased materialen kan bouwen. Zoals bijvoorbeeld schapenwol, cellulosevlokken, textiel, grassen en mycelium tot gerecycleerde grondstoffen, zodat waardevol materiaal niet zomaar verloren gaat. En dit alles hebben we toegepast in 2 living labs. Nu, wat is zo'n living lab? Wel, dat is aldoende leren. Hier zien we dan een maquette van een toekomstbestendige rijwoning. Dankzij het gebouw kan je net zoals Lego-blokjes de materialen aanpassen, de plaatsing bekijken en de impact op het milieu testen. Het gebouw is demonteerbaar. Je kan het volledig uit elkaar halen en terug heropbouwen op een andere locatie. Bestaande materialen zoals houten balken, gevelbekleding en tegels worden hergebruikt, zoals in deze case. Het Cbci-project ontwikkelt daarom samen met haar partners analyses, workshops, prototyping, living labs en real-life case studies. Deze studies bewijzen dat circulair en biobased bouwen wel degelijk mogelijk is. Waar wachten we nog op? Wil je zelf een steentje bijdragen of meer weten over circulair en biobased bouwen? Dan is hier informatie in overvloed. Wil je mee de transitie in gang zetten? Breng zeker eens een bezoekje aan Kamp C en laat je verwonderen door de mogelijkheden.
Yeah, that was definitely worth an applause. It didn't only sound promising, it really looked promising as well. I think we can all agree on that. And that's the end of our second roundtable session. So we really see that there is clearly potential in the Belgian market for bio-based and circular building, but sensibilization is still needed. And to go from thinking to actually building a house, we have to meet in the middle with methodologies that both worlds use. And we can also bridge this gap between thinking and building with cooperations like the Living Labs and the Cbci ambassadors like Kamp C, etc., etc. So I would like to thank our speakers for spreading your wisdom, Lode Lefebvre, Myron Koster, Maro Saridaki, and Wim Pieters. Thank you so much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will have another 10-minute break. So we'll see you after the break. And we're back for our final session this morning, ladies and gentlemen. The most important part, the conclusion. So please welcome Emile Coignel, Alexis Verseelen, Tine Heijzen, and Lisbeth de Vetter. Welcome, everyone. Emile, of course, no need to introduce you. You're world famous since the first round table of this morning's session. And Alexis, you're an architect specialized in sustainable design, but you're also a lecturer here at the Ghent Technology Campus. So thank you for having us here today. and Mrs. Tina Heijse, Executive Councillor for Environment, Climate and Housing of the City of Ghent. Again, thank you very much for having us. And finally, Liesbeth de Vetter from the Centre for Sustainable Building of the Province of East Flanders, the co-sponsor of this event. Thank you very much for your generous donations. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this conclusion session, we will look for the answer to the basic question for CBCI. How can we organize the practical application of bio-based renewable materials in a circular way, and at the same time produce them in an industrial way? And every one of you will answer that question, of course, from your own perspective. And I'm going to start with you, Emile, as always, right? So regarding the urgency about waste and exploitation of materials, energy, biodiversity, and people, and regarding the way to handle and organize the collaboration, so what are your basic reflections?
Well, if you see in the project itself, it needs from the start actually not only the ambition, but the commitment of all the partners. It needs actually to address all the topics from the beginning and to keep on track actually with the topics. That's the most important. And the collaboration you use for it, that's another important one. So the motivation to keep on motivated, to help each other in the motivation, to organize actually continuity in your teams, because that's maybe the most variable aspect, that are real important aspects. If you look at what we did not do enough is maybe the social aspect, because we're doing this, as your introduction shows, to make it a better world, and it's about people. So to connect with the people, the users of the living environment, actually that's our task as professionals. So to introduce it not only to the people which use it, but also to share with them the knowledge and maybe to collaborate with them in the project.
And how would you do that?
Well, there's a lot of methods for participation. It's only a word, but to inform people from the start what's going to happen, what's your point of view, can you not only address things but also be part of the solution. I think that makes it, and that for the users itself, but you see it also for the professionals in the construction industry. One of the most valuable things actually is to introduce it to the workers on the site, on the construction site, or in the field, or in the fabric where they produce things, because they're sometimes at the end, but they are at the beginning of to make it a good product and to understand why they use bio-based materials, why they have to mount or demount it in construction, what's the purpose of it. If they don't understand, I think they're not robots.
Of course.
So the commitment they have to their work and to be proud of their work and to look at it in a way that it is indeed more of value when you produce it in such a delicate and fine way, that's, I think, the most important thing.
Okay. Thank you very much, Emile. Then I will get to you, Alexis. I have two questions for you. Well, my question is actually twofold. So as an architect, the way you organized and designed the CBCI process, and as well as you organized the CBCI output, so what are your basic reflections on both aspects?
Yes, well, I have been taking some notes this morning. Yeah. Well, one of the first essentials of the CBCI project, which was also mentioned in one of the white papers, is affordability. And affordability was not mentioned quite a lot this time now or this morning, but there is a strong link also with the SDGs, and especially the first SDG on poverty reduction. And I think also of the challenges about housing and care, the topics we have been working at in CBCI, and the problem of the Matthews effect. Middle class people that are advanced or let's say more advanced than people that really are in need. And I think, well, I would like to refer to a book that has been published recently by a colleague of KU Leuven, Wim van Lanker. He is a poverty expert, and the title of his book is "Why Don't Yellow Vests Ride with a Cargo Bike?" The yellow vests, let's say, are the symbol of the people living in financial problems, probably, and then the cargo bikes users, that are the middle class people. So he considers those two worlds as very separate and not understanding each other. I think with Cbci, and that's what I think has been clear this morning, I think we have taken steps to put both worlds closer together. There is still a lot of work to do, but and that's one of the reasons why I'm very happy also that we have Tina Heijse as executive councillor of the city, because she's responsible for housing, and at the same time also for climate and environment. So both should be taken in consideration together. But I will not tell what you are going to tell, of course. But so we see, for example, in social housing projects here in Flanders, that actions like, for example, PV panels, it's still rather an exception than and that's the same for measures concerning circularity and bio-based used projects and so on. So there's I think a long way to go, and with Cbci I think we met these challenges. So did we develop what we developed? Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but I think it's the right solution to societal changes that are ongoing now. Societal changes, and we made a link in Cbci with what is going on in society. And I have two keywords that I would like to use. There is the tendency in construction of legalization. We know the Lego as a toy, but we see that in construction today there is legalization happening very fastly.
And what does that mean?
Legalization, well, it has everything to do that is to do with the modularity, the demountability, the interchangeability of components, and so on. We see it on a technical basis, but we see it also in the process. We could consider the process, the whole process, from the project definition, the building permit, the design of the building. So all these approaches or steps require a circularity, but can also be isolated. Of course, we prefer having them in a whole, but also tendering financial innovation and so on. So as also a kind of legalization that meets these challenges. Another keyword I want to use is the hybridization. Hybridization, yes, well, that's a term that comes from chemistry, and I think we could consider ourselves a bit as alchemists, maybe, in the whole process we have been working in. So hybrid in different senses. On the component level, we have been combining steel elements with wood elements in a hybrid way. On the structural level, we have been combining, or there is a potential to combine traditional building methods with industrial building methods in both new buildings as renovations. There is hybrid forms of ownership, which is a tendency in business, but also in our project here, for example, for the technical devices. There is hybrid on a functional level, and then, of course, also on a partnership level. So integrating all these elements, I think that's one of the things we achieved with this project.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexis. That was very insightful, so thank you. Then it's Tina's turn, Executive Councillor in the City of Ghent. Welcome. So how do you deal with the circular economy in construction, and what are your future plans with regard to the circular economy in construction, so in the future?
Well, to start with, I'm now Deputy Mayor for Climate since 9.5 years, and I'm also Deputy Mayor since 3.5 years also for housing. When we started, and I want to show you, maybe you can't see it, but I explain it. It's my favorite figure, this feet. So what does it mean? It has all to do with the CO2 emissions of the city of Ghent. Now, normally what you see is that if you put a globe above Ghent, you can count the CO2 emission that comes out from cars, from houses, and so on. And that is the toes and this part of the feet. That's the large industry. Now, I won't talk about that, not because it's not important, but I want to talk about this, the blue part. And that's especially called that the Scope 3 emissions. And what does it mean? It's in the indirect emissions. Because, of course, all what we consume is not necessarily produced in Ghent. But as you can see, the cities work on that part, but this part is much larger. And so this insight is very important for me. And so we decided in the city of Ghent, even if you could say, you know, we only deal with the direct CO2 emissions, because that we can count and we can report. And it's of course very important that we reduce them. But if you know that the indirect emissions are larger, even if it's more difficult to count them, especially if you do things and you reduce it, how much do you reduce, but you know it's more important, you should focus on that as well. And that was the reason that already 9 years ago, we decided not only to work on the direct CO2 emissions, but also, for example, on food consumption and production. And now, what's to do with the construction and all what's the circular economy, more and more, this term, we also try to deal more with circular economy. Also, for example, on construction, because that's also in this blue part. So that was an insight, and the good thing is that we have different colleagues, deputy mayors, who also work on circular economy. Because it's so important. It's important for climate reason. I am the climate deputy mayor, but also important for the economy, also for social economy. And of course, we also have a deputy mayor who is responsible for our own buildings. It's quite clear if you have to learn things, because quite clearly we have to still to learn a lot of things about it, we should lead by example. And that's exactly what we are doing the last years. And I give you some concrete examples. What we are doing is not only my thing, it's of course from my colleagues as well. So some examples. In our former service center in Gentbrugge, that is undergoing a complete renovation, and that is with some circular intervention. For example, this building has concrete balconies, and we will reuse them. So it sounds very easy, it isn't. But okay, that's life, and if you will lead by example, we have to do that. So they are detached from the facade, and then we'll put back after insulating the building, because the building is horrible on energy consumption, so we have to do something about insulation, but we will reuse these concrete balconies. Then all people in Ghent who are living in Ghent will know that we also have a big project, what we call at the south, our administrative center is being renovated, and the main goal of that is to become fossil-free. But also one of the starting points was that for this renovation was to break down as little as possible. And thus to avoid using raw and new materials. Another concrete example is in the Design Museum. I have to say we have a director of the Design Museum who's really superb in that kind of matter. She's really into circular economy. She can talk about it in a very nice way. And so they making a new wing, let's say. And one of the challenges she's going for is using circular bricks. Bricks, yeah. But of course, it comes with a lot of challenges. That's if you're pioneering, that's the way it goes. And one of the challenges is to get this circular break is to get it. How you say that? The certification of it. And it's a nightmare till now. But so we hope that things can be, because that would be, of course, a very nice thing. And the Design Museum more and more is a museum that really wants also to play a major role in this culture change we want. And that's what museums should do. And if the director succeeds and the whole thing succeeds, that the new wing is also renovated and rebuilt with the circular breaks, that would be a huge statement. Absolutely. So that's a bit leading by example. We want to learn from it, because clearly we still have to learn a lot. And we want to learn from it to do more this kind of projects, but also to communicate about it, so that showing if we can do it, others can do it as well. That's the main point. So that's one role of the city, leading by example. But of course, we have other roles as well. The role of also collaborating in projects. We do that a lot. We always search connections with also university, high school, and so to work together on different projects. We have, for example, City of Ghent is lead partner in the Interact project URBCOM, which focuses on alternative raw materials for the production of concrete. That's another project. And there are many grant calls for circular projects, and also there's a project we want to really realize is about urban mining, because what we see is that we would like to have a project, and I know Isabel, who's here who's working for me, that's her dream, and she's to realize a project where we have a hub, where you can recycle, where you have used construction materials, and that's so that there's a hub and you can use it again. So that's one of our dreams. And then we have also small projects. For example, we had a circular circuit. That was a kind of, we selected projects that we also to showcase this, let's say, but we give them a push. We also give them advice, also how can you, as a new project, realize your new project, how do you do that? And so we have this kind of contest and network as well. So there are some of the things we are trying to do, knowing that, of course, we want to do much more in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that sounds very ambitious. The City of Ghent really leading by example. And yeah, thank you for sharing the future plans of the City of Ghent. I think that everyone was very interested by your insights. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Lisbeth, who is expert on sustainable building of the province of East Flanders. And I have the same questions for you as for Tinne, Lisbeth, of course, slightly different. How do you deal with circular economy in construction, but then at provincial level? And what are your future plans with regard to circular economy in construction, of course, also at provincial level?
Okay. First, let me say that for us, it's not about the province level. Okay. It's bigger. We are part of a bigger challenge on which all of us will have to deal with. And that is government, but that is also every civilian, so every single one of us. It's about companies. It's about so much more than what we can do as a province. And that is what we think is important to keep in mind. All our decisions we make as a province, they should go for the same goal and not just do something on which we think we are good, but it should add a value to the longer term perspective. And that is, as you probably all know, that our planet has 9 planetary boundaries, and we succeeded already in exceeding 5 of them. The building industry has a huge impact on several of those planetary boundaries, and for us, that's the goal. We have to go on back in respecting those planetary boundaries. So the decisions we make should go in that direction, should have an added value in reaching that. But as here was said already this morning, there is a social aspect about it. It's just not enough to make the energy supply fossil free. That will not be enough. There's always a social aspect we should integrate into each and every single one of our decisions. So that is why the donut model of Kate Raworth is so valuable, because she combines both sides. At the outer side, you have those planetary boundaries, but at the inner side, there are social aspects. We humans, we live on this planet together with all fauna and flora, and we should find the border in between, the circle, and that's where we are going to. So as a province, we keep that in mind, and then we have our own climate plan, which is already from 2015. So in these days, that is old already, because things are changing so rapidly. Now this year, 2022, we have an updated climate action plans with very operational actions in it, but also with those long-term perspective, because we have set our goal at climate neutrality as a province by 2040, not 2050, but 10 years earlier, which means we have to sharpen a lot of things. And that is what we are working on. And together, we think very important thing, which I didn't hear yet today, is the spatial aspect of where we are going to live, where is the industry, and that has a very high impact. Not only circularity on its own or material use, whether raw or recycled, but where are we going to live, to construct, to how, because that influences our mobility and so many other aspects like food and etc. So that is why we are working now on a new spatial plan for the whole province, which will be launched next year, because it will set the goals until 2050. How would we like to be our province divided, and where are we going to able to live, to produce things, and etc. Because we think that that has a very huge impact on all other things coming afterwards. But if you're asking me, also how do we see the future, that's an important part. But also we have invested in this project financially. We're doing that also for other projects, and we will continue that in the future. But then it has to fit in our climate plan, of which circularity is one of the aspects, and also what we call the innovation playground. And as long as it fits into that one, because then we are sure it's going for the same goal and not just giving some money here and over there to something which is on its own valuable, but it should fit a larger goal which we have to go to. Also, we're not only financially supporting a project, but it's making people talking together. It's facilitating such a process that people work together and etc. That's part of it, as well as participating on our own. We are participating in several European projects because we, as a province, we have also information we can add, and other way around, learn from others, not only by money, but by really being part of a project. And that's also what we do in Vlaio Living Labs. We support several of them. We have grants for circular chain projects. So on several fields, we try to help on constructing for that same goal. Like also with municipalities, I've heard here this morning, how does it come that bio-based materials are not so often used? And there were 4
slides.
It was on one slide that there were 4 aspects. And I thought, well, that's very good to see that also in this project, because we're working on those aspects already for a longer time. We are advising municipalities in constructing a new swimming pool or library or any other building, and we're guiding them, what I've heard here also this morning, from A to Z. It's not only the procurement one single step. It's a whole process. Which ambition, how high is your ambition? How are you going to reach it? Who has to be involved? How are you going to finance, to maintain? Which materials? There are so many things which I've heard here this morning, and that's already what we're doing, and we think that's a good way to continue.
Yeah. So that's good news.
Yeah, we're doing that also in our own projects, because as I've heard here before, it's very important to put an example by your own projects. So we think that all of these things are important, and we really want to continue to go for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone is very curious to see your new climate plan and the new spatial plan as well. So thank you very much for sharing your future perspectives and your future plans. And also thank you.
The spatial plan, sorry, but it was addressed in the third white paper we just finished, especially because that's, I think, a very good and important one. So it fits perfectly to your point of view.
It's coming next year.
2023. Yes. All right. Thank you very much, Emile, Alexis, Tino, and Lisbeth. And that basically wraps up our very informative morning. This afternoon, you will be able to participate in 2 rounds of 5 different practical workshops you can choose from here at the KU Leuven. So you will really get a deep dive into a variety of topics. For example, I don't know if they're on the screen. Yes, they are. So you can see them right there. So the workshops will begin at 1 p.m. I think there is a little surprise waiting around the corner. Alexis, you told me earlier. So let's make some time for that. I think it's a surprise for the ladies. There we are. And I think that deserves a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so I would like to thank again all of our speakers, all the panelists, of course you, ladies and gentlemen, for being present here today. You also at home for following our live stream. And I wish you a very pleasant day. Enjoy your lunch and goodbye. Thank you, Mel. Thank you. Thank you.